And you fought, so I had supported his candidacy.
All right, guys, it's 6 o'clock. I think we're waiting for Jonathan. But we will go ahead and get started, and I bet Jonathan will join us. Is he online by chance, or do we not know?
He couldn't be online. So
Oh, okay.
I don't see him on. Yeah, he's not. He identified he was going to be here.
Okay.
I talked to him earlier this week.
All right,
So
cool.
he'll be here.
All right, so I'll call to order the regular meeting, Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, February 5th. And we'll do a quick roll call. Who do we got out there? Is it Sherry?
Sherry. Chair Trent,
Here?
Vice Chair Murphy,
Here.
Commissioner Bennett,
Here.
Commissioner Graham,
Here.
and Commissioner Chesley, hopefully on his way, not in attendance yet.
Okay, perfect. All right, roll call. Jamie, or I'm sorry, Pledge of Allegiance. Jamie, you want to lead us?
You want?
You're so good at it.
I'm getting to the point where I don't remember.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Let's go. Hey, Jonathan, there you are. Good to see you. No worries. All right, approval of the agenda. Lucas, any changes or?
Well, before that, we probably should identify and recognize that Commissioner
Jonathan.
Chesley has seated
Aye.
himself at 6:01.
Yes, and do we need to do a roll call to make?
Nope. That announcement will then have Sherry note that as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we can do the approval of the agenda, correct? Okay.
Yep. No changes recommended.
Okay, perfect. Now is the time for public communications. These are for items that are not on the agenda for tonight. And I don't see any speaker cards. Do we have, Sherry, do we have anybody out there in TV land?
Not on this, not on,
Not on public comment?
that's correct.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll move on to the consent items and the meetings of the regular meeting from the January 15th meeting. Any changes? Anybody?
I move the consent items.
Oh, Judy, you had
Second.
something. Oh, okay. All right. We get a roll call? Sherry?
Yep. Chesley,
Present.
Graham,
Yes.
Bennett,
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes,
Trent.
Yes. All right.
he covered both bases with one word.
All right, cool. We'll move on to discussion item number 2, to review and discuss the City of Ojai design guidelines and community-wise planning. And Lucas, did you have any, you want to give us some meat to
I'll
talk
just
about?
I'll do the phrase that I like to use all the time when we're having a discussion and there's a decision being asked for. I'm setting the table. Some of that setting the table exists with the staff report and the information that was provided for this body. As you recall, this is an item that this body had asked to return at a future meeting, and that was something we discussed on the 15th of January. So I actually have some slides that we could show and point to as well. I'll just kind of highlight those as well. There's two things that are up for discussion for tonight. One is the Ojai design guidelines and those standards that exist. And these are really all of the standards and guidelines that we have for the city of Ojai. They all extend really from the central core area of Ojai to the east. As we had thought, and it's been confirmed, there are no standards that exist along Ojai Avenue to the west. So the second piece is something that was identified as a separate piece, but we folded it into these design standards. And it's the community-wise, and really it's the fire hardening piece. And I've provided some information just as a read-through, but I want to caution this body that the fire hardening pieces are really a building code requirement and standards. The community-wise piece isn't necessarily. That's something that can be done kind of as a bigger picture piece. So I think it was important that you saw that. as well as just understanding the fire hardening parameters.
I appreciated having the fire hardening parameters included. I wonder if we couldn't incorporate the landscaping concept with the design, because they do have landscaping in our design standards, and the fire hardening is saying no landscaping within 5 feet of the perimeter of the building. And I think that this is be a good place to point that out.
Sure. Yeah, I think I was thinking of the building pieces, not necessarily of the
But they're in here.
growing pieces, but yes, for sure. The landscaping piece is kind of a different wrinkle, for sure. From a Ojai Design Standards Guidelines piece, I'd like to share screen and then kind of highlight these design standards if I could. All right, so here what I've done here is I've shown that there are 4 different design standards. They include the statement of theme, which is highlighted in purple, the Ojai, what we call the East End Ojai Design Standards, but the title of it is just East Ojai Avenue Design Standards. And that's in blue that you can see here, and it's that dotted line to the east. And then the Arcade Plaza is that one that's centrally located in white. And then the Ojai Arcade storefronts is the line that's really drawn in red. And I think what's important to note for the very last one, the one I just mentioned, is it's really just the arcade and the storefronts. It doesn't include the interior portions of the storefronts. It doesn't include the back portion, because really the back of house is handled through the Arcade Plaza. And then the East Ojai Avenue piece is really everything to the east of that central core area. And then the statement of theme is that central core area and then beyond. Now the really kind of the interesting piece about this is there's a lot of overlap with these design standards. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do we identify and address which standard is applicable? And it's really the stricter of the standards. And there's a common theme with each and every one of these, and that is that kind of that mission revival or mission design standard. With the exception of the East End design standards, and initially those were thought to be kind of more of a Western theme, but it's really kind of evolved into the mission revival piece. So,
And I noticed we have South Fulton on here, which is a neighborhood, and also South Shady Lane, which is another neighborhood. Were those were they not quite developed at the time, or were they recent, or?
yeah.
Curious, they're kind of outliers.
So these, I know, I'm not, okay, so Whispering Oaks, like for instance, that's been around for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And
Is
then-
Whispering Oaks the sort of panhandle that goes
Yeah,
next
Oh
to the
yeah, I
golf
should
course?
probably.
South Shady.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
not everybody's gonna know where
Right.
Whispering Oaks is. Let me just, if I can. It's right here.
Right.
It's this area, this stretch right here. And then,
And that is that's a newer community, I believe, newer neighborhood.
it's about 20 years old.
Yeah,
It received awards. It's an affordable housing
Yep.
development.
yep,
Um,
but not Mission Revival.
It is not.
No.
It is not. It kind of has that Western
Yeah.
theme to it.
Yeah.
So
Interesting, okay.
Does this apply to like residential buildings as well, to people's homes, or is it just commercial property?
So you can see most of this is commercial property, but there are some residential, like for instance, I mean, we can kind of get into the,
Are we, yeah, sorry if we're jumping ahead. I know we're getting into discussion, but
no.
it's fine.
This
Okay.
is okay, so just so everybody understands, this is a discussion. This is going to be a discussion.
Yeah, okay.
The formatting is a little bit looser tonight,
Right.
in terms of what we're doing here. Now, public hearings have very strict standards that we've got to follow, and then follow that procedure if we reopen public hearing.
Right.
Well,
That's not necessarily the case here
I
tonight.
point out to reinforce it's not just mission revival, and it's not just commercial. It's also vacant lots that are adjacent to R1 residential.
There are, okay, so,
I mean,
well,
not a
there
lot
are
of lots,
some
but
that
there
are
some.
R1. There's also more that's in the VMU, C1.
Right.
I
I didn't mean to single out R1, but it ranges from R1 through VMU through, there's a mixture of stuff
There's
adjacent.
kind of a hodgepodge of
That
different
is part of the corridor.
zoning districts, yes.
Zoning district. So it, and that development can be in there, even though it may be, say, zoned R1. That is,
Well, just so just so that we're all on the same page, R1 is single family.
right,
So it's not, oh, we can also do commercial. No, that's not, R1 is single family.
right. But there are R1 lots which are adjacent to the commercial lots that are in this east extension.
Yeah,
So in terms of, all I'm saying, we have to be careful that although this shows a broad band, and it takes in not only the Ojai Avenue facing streets, lots, it takes in the lot typically that is next to it, down the street in terms of the visual here, and that may be anything. It could
yeah,
be
sometimes
R1.
it's kind of interesting how the carve out takes place. On the north side, it's pretty clear when you're looking at the commercial areas that exist along this edge, and then very clearly you're seeing single family residential just
Right.
above it, right?
Yeah.
There isn't a clear distinction of like a buffer. It's a discussion that we had for other considerations, and noted that during that discussion that, geez, there's really not a buffer when you have that commercial. That commercial is married and directly abutting
Right.
and to the single family residential. Very true.
Right.
That's not necessarily true for areas like, for instance, along Bryant Street, and then like South Fulton and Bald Street, Fox, Montgomery. You have kind of a phasing or transitional period for those areas, with the exception of maybe South Fulton, because we talked about that area at one point, and the residential uses that exist there as a non-conforming use, and whether or not that area, which is zoned M1, should then have some sort of a different delineation.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
okay, so each one of these so you've read the material, you've had an opportunity to kind of absorb it. This is what you had asked for. This is a discussion piece, and I have the slides up here for each and every one of these
Oh, cool.
design guideline areas, boundary areas. Here, it's really the core area of the downtown.
Well, let's do this. Let's just make sure we set the stage, and then I would love to open it up to the public. I know we've got a couple folks that want to speak, and then we can kind of get into some deliberation and just chat about stuff, or discussion, I guess.
Yeah, it's discussion.
But to kind of set the stage, so how these overlays work is like, that's the arcade, so that's probably the most restrictive, I would assume.
Yeah, so let's work it backwards. So
Yeah.
the storefront, arcade storefront design guidelines, the wrinkle with this one is that because that area is landmarked, I think
Yep.
it's landmark 6, it requires Historic Preservation Commission consideration for
Correct.
anything. So if you're touching it, it's going to HPC.
Correct. And,
So-
and really the purpose of this discussion was more to discuss the west side of town, where these don't exist. But in order to do that, we need to understand what we currently have.
Correct.
Right.
Well, I think there was a misunderstanding that, and it is surprising, how none of this stuff really stretches
Right.
west of Signal.
Yeah,
That
so
it
this
it
is-
really, stops there, and all of the dynamic is taking place on the east end of town.
Correct.
A quick question, is the red line, the arcade storefronts, is that what is historic, or is it the entire statement of theme?
It's just
Purple.
the storefront.
It's
The
just the
storefront and
storefront that
and
is
basically the
historic.
arches. So everything up to the storefront. Nothing beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Aren't, isn't the arcade itself owned by the city?
I
The
think so.
I think the understanding is that I mean, we maintain it, right? So we go in and we do regular maintenance to it. So whether or not it's on Ventura County or Caltrans right-of-way, or if it's within our right-of-way, we maintain it.
Yeah.
So let's assume that it's Caltrans. We likely have some sort of an agreement that allows us to maintain that.
But the individual stores are privately held from sort of the window frame in,
Correct.
right?
Correct. But because of these standards requires, and because of the landmark designation requires a stricter standard of review.
Does the red line extend across the street, literally at the other side of Ojai Ave?
No.
That does not, no, not in this case. But for instance, if we go up, not this one, this one, this one, it does. The statement of theme, which is also the mission revival, carries south of Ojai Avenue in a peculiar line that's drawn across, straight across, and over the park. So it's just like kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah.
But I also think it's somewhat necessary because if you look at the ends, there's some importance to that. You've got Walkers to the east,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got it's kind of a Spanish style building. I think it was the bank at one point, kind of holding down that southwest portion as well.
Sure.
And the theme doesn't necessarily have to be Mission Revival, correct? Or
No,
or-
you're following these standards. So anytime that you're applying, and mind you, we don't get a lot of these applications that come in. More so for the facade regarding the statement. I'm sorry, not the statement of theme, but the
Okay, I think
arcade
I-
storefront design guidelines. We get a lot of
So beautiful,
review
full back
considerations for those, which then
Right.
goes to Historic Preservation Commission.
No, I understand now. So the statement of theme that applies for the strict standards with the arcade are outlined in white, correct? And then the purple line that you had there, that one is actually, that is an area, well, okay, so that's an area statement of theme. So I guess I'm confused on what's the statement of theme and what's the actual, design standard.
It's a different slide.
Because,
It's not one of these two. There it is. It's the
Yeah.
purple one.
Here's your statement of
The
theme.
purple one.
So it extends the net of these guidelines extend further than the area for, like, for instance, the plaza.
See,
The plaza, while it's highlighting the entire area, the
Okay.
focus of the plaza is
Yeah.
really the internalized components, and you see that through those guidelines and the standards that they speak
Right.
to.
and this is a different statement of theme than the east end of Ojai, correct?
Correct.
The blue line that we were just looking at.
Yeah, the blue line that we're looking at is because there's some potentially some underutilized areas and vacant land that still exists there to a certain degree. That area was extended that far, I think, with the hopes of making sure it was marrying
Yeah.
the design.
Got it.
And it carried through to the end of the Ojai's boundaries.
And that answers a question I've got, and that is, to the extent that there's an undeveloped parcel, these, both the east end piece and the theme piece here, if there were an empty parcel, or a parcel that needed to be redeveloped because of the condition of the building or whatever, these guidelines are to help the new owner and developer of that property understand what the community is trying to achieve in the boundary.
Yeah, so instead of, okay, so examples of sites that are outside of guidelines, the focus is on what's surrounding it,
Right,
right? It's not necessarily giving you a playbook, but it's saying, hey, your playbook is really what does your community look like? Community context and character, architectural theme, right? Scale. The 4 pillars. Here, it's saying, oh no, we've got that covered. You need to follow these. And here's some guidelines for you from that standpoint. But if you think you're coming in with mid-century modern
Right.
or something else that's eclectic, think again. It's really got to follow the standards that we're seeing here. So,
I guess what I'm saying is, and the example that I use is, we have a gas station squatting at the corner of Ojai and North Montgomery.
It's okay, I just didn't want to hit.
And can you point that out?
yeah, I'm trying to get my,
You're gonna
there it
find
goes.
There it is.
Right
That's
here?
it, right there.
Right.
And I guess it's, what's the force of the statement of theme here for this area? If that gas station were to become available, if it was put up for sale. Because electric vehicles had taken over and there was no demand for gasoline
So
in the
let's
city
assume, let's use that as an
All right.
example. So there is the statement of theme as a guideline
All right,
for it. There is also, if you look at the very edge here, I can,
where,
my little cursor to catch up here. There it is.
oh, right in that corner, right?
Yep.
Yep.
There is, it's also within the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines. And it's too far, and it's in the Ojai Arcade Plaza architectural design guidelines. Okay, so question,
Yeah, what does that mean?
which one do we apply?
Is it just the most
It's
restrictive?
it's the struggle that staff has every single time that we look at a project that's either coming forward or someone's asking a question. Now, I have an answer for you.
All right.
I have an answer. This isn't a quiz for you. It's more like we've already done the deeper dive on this. So, for instance, you have the gas station and the inner portion of it, or the portion to the north, that really is focusing on the arcade plaza design guidelines. Because really, the arcade, if you're looking at the details that it's providing there, it's internalized. It's highlighting the entire area, but it's internalized in terms of its focus. Making sure that what's being focused on the inside is reflective of and complementary to what's happening on the outside. So we would apply and be mindful of what's happening on the north end. For, not that one.
That's the south.
For the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines, we basically split between the statement of theme design standards and the East End Ojai design standards. So right now, the East End speaks to kind of a Western theme, but then transitions into a mission. Knowing that it's so close to what's already mission, we would focus on that, maintaining the mission revival, basically style, architectural style, versus going into a different direction.
Aren't there also some, and I can't remember which section it was in, some instructions about the fact that these commercial buildings will be essentially on the sidewalk so that they don't have a setback the way a gas station has a setback for its building?
Yeah, the building there is tucked to the back for a very good reason, right? It wants those.
Yeah.
It wants everything to be focused on the front, easy in, easy out access.
Yeah, so it's
And
about its
they
curb
push that
cuts
building.
and getting people.
Versus it turning into a different use and having a different symbol. You're potentially looking at, if they were to demo it and start new, yes, absolutely. You would want that building instead to be towards the front,
Right.
right? And then have that parking tucked in the back.
So how
But
do we
also
do,
being
how do we do
mindful-
that? How do we ensure that? That is, in what document do we place it, and how do we ensure that if the parcel ever came up for sale, that the developer who was developing it didn't build a traditional mini mall with an L-shaped piece of, hugging the property line, an L-shaped piece of commercial property with a parking lot out in front.
It requires a design review permit. So the design review permit is a discretionary review process for this. We apply these guidelines,
Right.
and on top of that, we're looking for consistency there. And on top of that, we're also applying the many standards and checks and balances that exist as a part of the design review
What might-
application.
I'm wondering if it's like a clear way of thinking about it. You know, I mean, the way it seems to do something like that would be like, why overlap them at all, you know? Seems like a way of at least tying the East Ojai district to the downtown core, less so as a way to, guide something, but more as a way to sort of pull the guiding light of that central area. And like you said, I mean, it seems like to the question, Jamie, it's like if you're redeveloping this whole site, you're beholden to all of it. So there's really, there's nothing in any of this that says you're gonna have parking in the front, first of all. Like all of them say that's not happening. So that's fine. That's like kind of taken care of. You're gonna be responsible for the back arcade because it does, connect in a way. It's the weakest connection, as we know, but there is stuff on the other side behind where Jav and Joe is and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then you have the theme. So the theme, the statement of theme is going to direct the style probably more than the East Ojai theme. But then of course, then you're like reinforcing it as you build towards the East Ojai theme, which makes you kind of want to push it that way.
What I'm trying to get at, is there any way that we can reinforce what we have already, which are two documents which have both achieved consensus and were voted on, to make it so that a use which involves 4 curb cuts and essentially the gas station use is not continued as a permitted use upon the sale of the property, that it has to essentially then become conforming to a set of rules which both reinforce some of the things that are in the statement of theme and some of the things that are in the East End statement. And the reason I'm rabid about this, and I'm repeating myself, is because I watched it all happen in the 1980s in Los Angeles when gas stations, for some reason, began to disappear and they all turned into mini malls. And it's a terrible form of pedestrian destroying development. And this is the pedestrian core of our city. If there's some way to get the gas station out of there and move down the street, it would be of great benefit, I think, to the whole community.
Isn't it right, like Lucas, that basically like that is true? Like you couldn't just build a mini mall like that. Not just because of our discretion here, but also because of this. But it's, in a way, it's great that you're bringing it up, it seems like to me, because I think we want to talk about it. Well, for the East End a little bit, but you still couldn't do it down there, but also, as was brought up at the beginning, for the West side, which seems to have kind of nothing, and that is the closest, type of thing to a mini mall typology that we have, until you kind of get to Vaughn's or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's a good point. I don't think it can happen here, even if we wanted it to, honestly.
You don't think what would happen?
I don't think you could do like
A mini mall,
development
yeah.
in this. There's too many overlays of things pushing against that, the way it seemed to read to me.
So let's lay out a hypothetical scenario. Gas station goes under. A gas station goes under. I hate using an example, but we're going to.
In this section here?
Yeah, let's say it goes
Well,
under.
there's a
We already
couple,
know
right?
that there's 3 different guidelines that exist
Mm-hmm.
that govern and rule it. And for whatever reason, the economy is not allowing for another gas station to reopen there. And instead, it just remains vacant for 3 years. And someone comes in and they're like, hey, we want to redevelop that.
Into a mini mall.
Well, let's not say it's a mini mall. Let's say, no, we want to reestablish it as a gas station.
Oh,
There's an electric gas station.
after 3 years?
After 3 years. So what happens after 6 months with any use within this city?
You have to.
It loses
Back to
all of its development rights.
Okay.
So if it had something before, it doesn't maintain that moving forward. We experienced that with a project that this body saw several times and had to drive it home to the community and to the applicant that it's been vacant for 3 years, 4 years actually. And because of that, you've lost all those development rights. You've got to start over, right?
All right.
And that was not an easy pill for them to swallow, but it was the way in which our code reads. We would apply that same standard here. So they have to start over. It's a vacant
If it's
building.
beyond 3 years,
It's a vacant building,
all right.
and we start looking at, does the form match what you're proposing? Oh, I want to do a mini mall. No. The design standards do not allow for what you're talking about. Instead, what you can do is you can start looking at demo and repositioning of the building so it meets these guidelines. It's as simple as that to talk about it now, but when you're having a conversation with a potential
The
applicant
applicant.
over the phone or in person, they're probably gonna be pretty agitated. But you gotta do your due diligence and do your homework before you start really diving into, the future of a potential site. So,
Was good.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
To clarify another thing, you keep on mentioning that the East Ojai Avenue district is western.
Yeah, it talks about a Western theme,
Oh,
Well, it talks about eclectic theme.
Yeah, it talks
So it
about
talks
quite
about
a,
Mission, Spanish Revival,
Yeah,
Western,
it's got a bunch of menus.
It's got some board and
Monterey.
batten, it's got.
Yep.
Craftsman.
I only bring that up because the last 2 proposals that I've seen had more of a Western kind of heavy timber feel to it than
Got
it
it.
did kind of a stucco mission style.
Yeah, and it does call out the Western
Yeah,
theme.
it's definitely one of them. I just wanted to make sure that
For whatever,
I was right. I mean, it's
It's
like
one
it
of-
can be.
it's-
It can be a. There's a variety of things it can be.
here's partially the challenge when someone's coming in having that conversation with us and we're looking at those guidelines. When it talks about eclectic, well, that's like the worst word to use. As an
Right.
architect or designer, it's like, oh, it can be anything then, right? Because everything is anything.
Eclectic, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Well,
It's like an architect's like failure to figure out what the design is. We'll call it eclectic.
Very true.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Because
I didn't
it's,
mean
I
to
mean, it still speaks about fitting in. So
Yeah.
that's
Correct.
That gives you like
Yeah.
the freedom within the constraint. I think is kind
Right.
of what it's saying.
So typically, there's a couple of iterations that come forward, either that staff review or we bring forward as a concept review to kick the tires.
Yeah.
Anytime an applicant comes in, regardless of the standards, it's typically, hey, do you want to kick the tires, or are you serious and you think that this design is going to be working and you've done your homework? We usually have that conversation almost immediately, especially in these areas. Let's hope you're meeting these, because if you're not, it's going to be an uphill battle, and I'm not seeing staff support.
Just out of curiosity of what you see coming through, do you see a lot of people who have not yet made a deposit on a property but are thinking about a use for a property, and so they come and see you to ask you whether they can do X, Y, or Z? Do they do that?
Yeah, I
before
call
they-
those
before-
people are spitballing at that point. They're not serious, They have a little bit of money down, but they're not like completely serious.
Right.
So it's like, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you think? I don't think the general plan's gonna support that for the following reasons.
Right.
You have guidelines here that are gonna restrict the use by which you're wanting, not necessarily the use, but the design by which you're wanting to
Right.
move towards. I would advise against. The nice thing about the way in which these guidelines operate is it's almost like a backstop in terms of how staff can react to situations that come up. Now, if it gets to a point where, hey, this design actually has some movement to it, let's go concept. And we'll talk to them about concept, right? Kind of walk them through that process.
Have them invest some money in design that can be brought here to examine as a
Before
concept.
this body, yeah.
Right.
Or before the Historic Preservation Commission, if they're looking to kick the tires. But typically, when it's going to the Historic Preservation Commission, they're beyond kicking the tires. A lot of times, we're catching people in the middle of doing something. We're like, stop doing it. You weren't supposed to do anything. And usually, we're having him backtrack and having to go through the process. I don't know why. There's been a couple where people have had their ducks in a row. But it just, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting scenario.
From my perspective, when I'm walking downtown, and I like walk downtown pretty much every morning, I can actually tell the difference between the statement of theme and where that ends and the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines start and pick up. And I'm curious, as like Ojai continues to grow, do we want to have separate, design guidelines? Or do we want something that's a little more homogeneous, that's going to allow for someone walking from, the west side all the way down to maybe, what would it be, towards Sarasota Park, like Park Road, to have, the same guidelines? Yeah, or even the hotels, like a little bit further down.
Yeah.
And so when I was reading through this and looking at all this, it just seemed messy. From the development that our community is going to see over the next 10, 20 years. And so this is like a question that I'm going to bring up once we start talking about it as planning commission, but I'm curious, Lucas, from a planning department perspective, does that make sense to you? Is that something that maybe causes more of a headache?
So when I first looked at these design standards, when I started here 6 years ago,
Yeah.
it was a little bit confusing to me that we had so many guidelines that were overlapping, because you start sorting through which ones you apply. Do you apply all of them? Why do you apply all of them? But once you start reading each of them, you start realizing that each of them speak to each other. They're building on each other. They're not necessarily competing against each other. Even with the East End design guidelines, they're not competing. It's allowing for that flow of transition. And while it's calling it eclectic, I still only really see two main, and one is that Western theme, and then it kind of has that transition into kind of a mission style. So there is, to your point, it is kind of interesting. Does it make sense to have one guideline that kind of governs, I'll even take it a step further, that governs that entire stretch or a portion of the stretch west of the edge of what we've been looking at today? Excellent question.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
That's the discussion piece.
Well, I guess we'll talk about it later.
So
But there's no need for us to answer that question
No.
outside of the context of this fuller discussion about what does this all mean, and is it what we want?
Let's hear from the community, and we
Yeah,
can-
I was going to say, let's hear from the community. I just wanted to set the stage to make sure we all understood what we're talking about.
This is fun.
And also understand what our current guidelines are, just so we set the stage. But yeah, so let's call in the general public. So I got Gina up first.
Hi, I'm Gina McCatton. I am the new chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, but I'm speaking tonight on a letter that Craig Walker, who is a local historian and fellow commissioner, wrote, and he's sick, so I'm reading it for him. The Historic Preservation Commission recognizes the importance of streamlining the history's design guidelines, including those downtown. I'm sorry, I just realized that this is cut off. That's just lovely. Okay, I'm gonna get my phone. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I haven't started the timer, so.
Oh, okay.
Could you pull your microphone down a little bit so we can hear you better?
There
Thank
you go.
Okay. That's what happens when I did an old lady size for my old eyes. It cut off on the edges. So my apologies. Okay. Okay.
Do you want us to come back
Okay.
to you?
The Historic Preservation Commission recognizes the importance of updating and streamlining the city's design guidelines, including those downtown. For over 2 years, the HPC has tried to set up a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to discuss this. We found there are several design guidelines that overlap in the same area. None of them address the design standards required for many of the historic buildings downtown and beyond. In 2018, the state of California identified and recognized a downtown Ojai historic district. It runs along Ojai Avenue between Blanche Street and Montgomery Street. There are 37 properties named in that district. 28 of them are contributing properties. Because the historic district is listed on the California Register, remodeled projects within the district or in its immediate vicinity must be consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards, or have any adverse impacts mitigated in some way. Ojai is also about 15 of its own landmarks in the downtown area. The county of Ventura has 2. Projects on local or state landmarks must not only be consistent with the interior standards, but each property carries its own design guidelines adopted as part of their landmarking process. The arcade design guidelines in your packet are part of the arcade's landmark designation. That makes 54 properties downtown that are either a state or local register and therefore require under CEQA to be reviewed under the guidelines and standards of the Secretary of the Interior standards. Several more, let me go. As you can see, most of the buildings downtown have either been designated historic, are eligible for designation, or in the immediate vicinity of a historic resource. We live in a special town rich in local, county, and state history. Following the historic standards will also make property owners eligible for CEQA exemption number 31, which is the California Historic Building Code, and possibly state and federal tax credits. Therefore, any design standards for the downtown should align with the interior standards and should assist in the process of preserving these historic resources and managing any rehabilitation work to the historic significance. CEQA guidelines require that city policies or design guideline changes that could negatively impact a historic resource must be reviewed themselves under CEQA. That is why design guidelines that could impact historic resources should be developed with the involvement of the HPC and a qualified architectural historian. Under our responsibilities and duties for the HPC, it is to develop guidelines, to recommend to council adoption of specific guidelines for alteration, construction, or removal of landmarks or properties and structures within historic districts. Any review and update of design standards should be a cooperative effort with the HPC and the Planning Commission. The HPC has asked for the city for a joint meeting with the PC for well over a year, and we ask that this be your recommendation too. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me point out that we received that letter from Craig earlier today or yesterday, and I'm not aware that you've been knocking on our door for a meeting. So the characterization of it's you guys are not responding is just not true. So I'm sorry.
I had mentioned that at our meeting as well, that I think that we have our meeting and we put it out into the air, but then we kind of just look at our minutes, we go on to the next meeting, and I don't think it's actually coming to you that we actually want to meet. So I think it's good that we're bringing it up tonight, that I think it would really benefit us all if we could streamline these things, we could have one overlay for the state historic district. We can eliminate fees for people who are caring for these properties. So there's a lot of things that we can do if we work together on it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, thank you so much. That was great. I got Brian up next.
Brian Akins, member of the Historic Preservation Commission, but here as an individual. So again, to answer your question, Jamie, that's for a project that we've been working on for a number of years, and one of the things that was to get to was to, if that project ended up being approved, was to have the HPC meet with the Planning Commission and do exactly what you're doing. Craig Walker and I, when we were talking about another project of yours just a few weeks ago, said we needed to start taking up this subject, and 3 days later, there it was on your document. So we're like, thank you, we're here. A couple things on so if you're looking at the buildings that are there along the arcade, the city owns the arcade itself. There are storefront guidelines. It's one of the 4 that are in there for what takes place on the front, on the outside of the building, or even we had a proposal where somebody wanted to move the outside wall and move it in a little bit in order to have seating off that sidewalk. So that, of course, came before us because that's a landmark. The other question, and I, of course, texted a friend and verified this with Craig Walker at home. The other thing is the pergola. You were asking about what's across the street. The pergola is not a landmark. However, it is also owned by the city and with upkeep. Interesting, though, that the post office is privately owned and run by a foundation who uses the rentals from that to benefit organizations throughout the community. So, you're going to, I've been texting with another individual, Don Teeting, who was very involved in doing the cultural resources a few years back, very much into detail. It's what she's done in consulting in other towns she's been in. So she will be also speaking about this in the upcoming Zoom. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that she's a person to pay attention to also. Okay?
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a
Yes, sir.
question, Brian?
Jamie.
I know there has been discussion for several years about creating a district, an historic district, which has not happened yet. I understand it's still under discussion. What is, and I believe the commission would like to see the district, but there are others who don't believe that it's necessary or is the right way to solve whatever the problem is. What is the hang up and what's the argument on the other side of that?
Okay, so let me answer you real quick. This goes back to a comment that Chair McHatton just said. So there is a state historic district that was put in place by the state back in 2018. We didn't know about it until 2021. Lucas is smiling because he knows this whole story behind it. So that is a part of the downtown area. Basically, they came in when Caltrans was doing the ATP, and they did a fabulous historical report going all the way through downtown. So that is the state historic district that Chair McHatton talked about. And so in the January vote, the decision was to go to that state historic district to focus on that, to make more people aware of it and the benefits that come from being a historic district at the state level. So right now, the Ojai Civic Center Historic District is on pause while we focus on the state historic district.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Awesome. I have Bill Miley next.
Hello. I specifically want to reference the East Ojai Avenue Design Guidelines, the section dealing with land use buffering. It's on page 15, and as an attachment C, it's page 21 of 51. Kind of confusing.
15 of 51.
An important planning factor I did not find as a separate coded section was anything on sound measurement and mitigation. I know there is an occasional reference, but I did not find any intense, detailed section on sound measurement related to code and building land management. There are 4 sections in the buffering chapter. Please see the one paragraph which contains a noise reference, and I included it in my email. It has a nice picture in it. Here are my comments. Technically, in my opinion, using the term noise is correct, but does not really seek the purpose we want. Noise is sound which disrupts depending on who listens. I suggest that noise be changed to, quote, sound that becomes noise, end quote. In participating in the Capri motel design discussions, I don't remember any specific reference to land use buffers. There was an issue of distance and time cutoffs. My effort to get routine digital measuring requirements for violation prevention and resolution with your commission and subsequently the council on appeal resulted in 0. Sad for me. I suggested sound measurement with recording decibel meters be added to the design guidelines. I personally have a decibel logger which is very advanced and connects to a PC for readout and storage. It will last operationally for almost a week on its battery. Sound environments are all over, you would agree. And frequently folks complain, if not near where they live, it becomes a passing issue. Next door, down. I have a couple of illustrations. This doesn't relate to the sound, but as I understand the state law, affordable housing can be in commercial zones by law. Another example for buffering, which was terrible, was the Tipple and Ramble issue with lights and sound. May I have more time?
Sure.
Thank you. Another issue which doesn't deal with buffering, it has to do with, please don't give away parking requirements. In lieu contributions would do it. In a past commission, you gave away almost $100,000 worth of in lieu money by removing the parking requirement. And kind of in closing, I would like your commission to visualize a patron sitting in a restaurant outdoor patio on Ojai Avenue, having to endure traffic sounds 20 to 40 feet away. It's noisy. Rubberized concrete repaving helps. But some vehicles are very loud due to faulty and illegal equipment. It can become nasty and destroy a nice meal environment. I would like your commission to consider adding a traffic sound enforcement element to the guidelines based on vehicle state law statutes. Likely our council will approve a budget of traffic enforcement officer next week. So vehicle sound violations can be mitigated. Our businesses should not have to endure nasty vehicle noise, especially those folks who intentionally generate it. Ojai should be quieter. Mostly Ojai is quieter. Mostly. Let's get it quieter. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I got Larry up next.
Larry Steingold. I support design standards, Western and Spanish Revival.
Mhm.
That's how this town makes its money, for the most part, because people come up here for the style of the town, from the east, from the arcade going, what have you. We should maintain that, whether it's by standards that are enforce because they're dragged out and that's just the way it is, or mandate it like things like Mystic, Sedona, Martha's Vineyard, where that's how they make their money. That's what brings the tourists in. And that's how we like it here, obviously. But keep it that way. And by standards, now, we mentioned spitballing by people calling in. All right, I think that's due diligence. I've seen too many buyers here that I know of already who have bought properties thinking they can make changes, knowing that they shouldn't have. And that's unfortunate. That's on the broker and on the buyers. But that's due diligence. Buying something subject to getting all your permits, which in this case would be tying up the property for 3 years and then maybe getting a permit. Automatic,
Excuse me, can I just
That's-
ask you a question about that? Is your concern there, and I
No,
just
that's
want to
an
make sure I
aside.
understand what you were saying, is that there is no prohibition for locking up a property for multiple years
oh, there is.
with a subject to clause?
course not.
And so we wind up with, if one of our jobs is to keep empty lots filled or
Whatever.
properties, whatever, the ability to lock up a property for a period of time because you haven't done your homework would seem to me to be.
Well, no,
is that what
a
you're
lot
saying?
of prospects make offers subject to getting all their permits prior to closing.
Right, okay.
Unfortunately, too many of them close without getting all their permits, show up here and go, hey, I'd like a 24-hour car wash permit. Oops. It's 12 hours. Surprise. Should have made it contingent upon getting the 24-hour clearance, as an example, or something like that.
Oh,
Or other properties. It's just, why would anybody buy a property and not get it contingent upon doing all the things they're supposed to do prior to closing? That's just good business. But on to automatic decibel meters. They're now ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're automatic. It should just be part of the deal. You buy a property, you abut a residential neighborhood, you have to buy 2 of these, and they respond to the city or whatever. Sound walls are going to be part of the deal. You're going to have landscaping buffers as part of the deal. It's just automatic in the code. I don't know if that's a conversation here. But being proactive is just telling the customer and the owner and the brokers that say, hey, they come in here, just so you want to know that everybody who comes in here for these buildings on this property, on those lines, has to have a buffering. It's going to be a sound wall, whatever it is, this is part of the deal. And you have to accept that, because we're here every week, every other week. Sound, buffering, so 20 feet. It is what it is. You're next to a residential zone, it's 20-foot setback, period, end of story, don't bother. There's going to be a sound wall, and this is it. There's no changes. You can come in here and ask, but we're telling you that it's not going to happen. But you can try. We can't tell you it's not going to happen, but, I'm just saying is be proactive, is tell these people, because they come in here, and thank you. But I
Thank you,
support
Larry.
design standards.
Okay. And just point of clarification, we are going to have a separate, on the agenda, we are going to talk about noise standards throughout the city. But
Right.
that's a separate item. Okay, cool. And I got Lorraine up next.
Hi, Lorraine Sims, Vice Chair HPC. I just wonder if you all have ever seen the 2018 California State Historic Report, because it's a fascinating read. It's fascinating from the standpoint of each of those individual properties, who's owned them, what they're all about. I've lived here for over 60 years, with the exception of a few, as has my husband. And we sat down and read all of this, and it is important to understand what that document says, because I think it brings a whole new look on the whole district itself, the whole town, because this is an old Spanish Revival town and how it was created. And I'm sure you've all read the books that have been written out there, Craig, you know, a lot of these people are brilliantly knowledgeable about all of this. And I think that together, we and the Planning Commission and the city can come up with a terrific set of guidelines. But I really hope you can each get a copy of it. It's about this thick. Well, it's worth it. It's fascinating. You can put it down and pick it up again in 2 days and read more about these things. I mean, I knew a lot of the people that owned those stores over the years. I remember Doug Jordan. I remember the Coles. I remember all of these places as a little kid. And to go back and see this report that I didn't know existed was fabulous. So I hope you can all get a copy.
Where are they available?
It is available with the city, at the City Hall. Lucas, could you help us with that?
I have a copy of it, yes,
A
virtually.
copy of it.
I borrow it.
And I can
And
certainly
it's
distribute.
double-sided, but believe me, it's well worth a read. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much. All right, anybody online? Sherry?
Yes, she just raised her hand. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Is she on? Oh, there we go. Okay, you're free to speak, ma'am. Hello? Can you hear us? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
yes. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you now.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dawn Teeting. I've been involved with historic preservation in Ojai for over 10 years. Thank you for discussing this important matter this evening. The term historic occurs 34 times in the administrative packet. However, the packet is absent information that downtown Ojai has already been designated a historic district by the state of California. The downtown Ojai Historic District is listed on the California Register of Historical Places and was formally determined eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. The downtown Ojai Historic District contains 28 historical resources. That's just within the district itself. These properties are considered historical resources for the purposes of CEQA. Numerous other historical buildings, including city landmarks, are contained within the area under review this evening. I encourage you to review the list of properties, which is available online at the State of California Office of Historic Preservation website, which is found in their Built Environment Resources Directory. And as Commissioner Sims said, I encourage you to read the 2018 Ojai Historical Resources Report for the area. This evening, I would ask you to please review Ojai design guidelines with the Ojai Historic Preservation Commission, as well as a historic preservation professional meeting the Secretary of Interior's professional qualifications for history, architectural history, or historic architecture. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you so much. All right, that is it with public comment. Anybody else, Sherry?
No.
Okay, all right, guys, we can keep going with the discussion. Anybody have any questions? And again, just point of clarity, Lucas, the noise ordinance or the noise standards that we're looking at, we are gonna talk about that on a future agenda item, correct?
We can.
We can, okay, I thought we already
We're going to
talked
look at
about it.
future agenda items.
I think when we look at future agendas, we can.
I just wanted
we
to
can
make sure that was
potentially
the
plug and
public was
play.
aware
We'll
of that.
require 2 commissioners to.
Okay, because I do remember we talked about it briefly on during the last.
Okay.
session. Yeah, yeah.
That might have been one that I didn't pick up, but
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
I have an observation about, after reading this, I'm really
Yeah.
actually impressed that the city is engaged with these issues
Mhm.
very thoughtfully and very specifically and at great length over a long period of time.
Yeah,
But I sure wish somebody were to take all of these reports and create a rational, single document, which, made it simple for the person who wants to purchase a property or develop a property, or for that matter, our staff to understand, or us, even more important to us, the dumb people up here, that we understand what there's a lot of overlapping here. There's a lot of, okay, well, this document deals with this issue and this document deals with that issue.
Yeah.
Is there a way in which we could hire or have the city hire somebody, a consultant, to consolidate this into a single document? And see, are there things which need updating? I must say, I was very impressed. I thought, well, you know, I'm gonna take out a sharp pencil and go through this stuff, and I was amazed at how much of it was so very well thought out at the time it was done, and it was usually, I guess, triggered by a concept or a development plan that somebody had. For instance, the arcade, the area behind the arcade that developed probably triggered one of these documents. So I'm just, I just wish it was a more usable document that both the public and we and staff could use.
Are you asking that the design standards remain the same for both the arcade and the eastern?
No, it can be, they can still be different, but they can be organized in such a way that it's a single document,
Instead
uses
of
the
3
same
different ones.
vocabulary, and says, okay, in the context of the document, it can say, here's our regulation for this area, and this is our regulation for that area, and so on and so forth.
I actually think I'm totally with you on that, and I actually think you could almost have a pyramid of decision making of, like, you know, if 3 apply, right? 3 of these guidelines apply, like the Ojai arcade storefronts will be, you know, the top of the pyramid. You have to meet that.
Right.
And if there's something that conflicts with that, like, that's knocked out, right? And the Ojai arcade storefront designs trump that. And then, you know, you can basically cascade down as you, like, move out towards the further part of the East End, where maybe that, like, Western, you know, theme or that eclectic theme becomes a little looser, and, you know, that becomes more acceptable, or on the west side as well, whatever we decide. But I am with you on that. The only other thing that I would add to that is whoever is reviewing these to kind of come up with that, I'd love to see someone from HBPC, also someone from, like, that can speak to wildfire preparedness, or even, like, fire hardening. That would be awesome. And then, you know, obviously, I'm with you on, like, an expert to come in and help basically draft.
We don't have any money.
Sure.
So I think what it has to be is us requesting that the city council do
Correct.
this, because
Yeah.
they do have money.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to come from us in some kind of a recommended form.
We could recommend to the city to
Right.
hire consultants to put all this together
Right.
and to take a deep dive into this, yes, correct.
Right, and since the city council turns over, as do the commissions, it's important that you know, you have to bring everybody up to speed, and this is made more complicated by the fact that it is the assemblage of multiple documents as opposed to a single document.
Okay, so
I agree with you, Commissioner Graham, about the fire, including the fire hardening. As I look at the western style that appears in the packet, it looks like it's ready for a fire. It's all wood. It
how those old buildings
looks,
were built.
well, yeah, but do we want that? I mean, come on, that's where the fire is coming at us from.
Sure.
Yeah.
East End, yeah.
The East End, you bet. When those buildings go up, we're gonna go up.
There are different, you know, timber forms. So heavy timber does have a, you know, a pretty
There
strong
are treatments that
resistance.
they can do,
Well,
but
just the-
what
just
I'm
the
asking
density of the-
is fire hardening
Yeah.
to be considered
Yeah.
as we,
But I love what you're saying as well, of, like, there are different types of timber. You know, that if we were to keep a Western theme on there, like, can we add something like that? Sure.
with treatments.
Yeah, I think that would be more Title IX though, right?
Probably.
building code?
Well, I think there's like design aspects of it.
Mhm.
So it's about the dimensionality
Mhm.
of the material.
Mhm.
Plays a huge role. And there's a lot of research has gone into it so that larger buildings can get built with heavy timber in urban settings, which historically have obviously very strict fire codes.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of
What's
there's a lot of stuff out there that we to tap into
Right.
related to that. It seems like, so I mean, riffing off Jamie's thought here,
Mhm.
like, would our job maybe to be to sort of think about a bit, like, because how would that process go? I mean, there's one thing going to the council for sure to get
Mhm.
money to do a thing, but it seems like maybe from tonight also, there might be a couple of meetings or things we want to do before. It does seem like one is definitely meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission, because that way, get aligned, if the
Mhm.
idea is to make this a kind of cohesive thing, it'd be good to be clear on the ideas. I mean, there's some tenets in this. Also the fact, I mean, this is, I think, quite good, as you say, Jamie. Of course, it was in 2001, most of it, so there's lots of things that have changed. What is the reality? What's interesting is we can actually probably look at some of these guidelines, particularly like the plaza, and we can walk back there now and see, like, well, whatever we can assess, or someone, as a group can assess the, how that impacted things and how productive it was. So I guess what I'm just saying is we should think about the process to get it to the point where we're asking for something
Mhm.
to be potentially paid for.
Absolutely. I've thought about this while we're all discussing and listening to public comment. I believe we have to go to the city council to get like a special committee or some sort of subcommittee put together, but it would be awesome to have representatives
Right.
from different commissions or boards to basically come together and maybe have a community liaison that can kind of put together the plan.
Right.
Maybe you have an outside person that's
Right.
approved by the city, and then each, like that subcommittee can basically have each representative bring back the piece that's relative to like their commission or board to basically discuss and approve to then go back to the city as part of a cohesive design. But I do think it's going to take different people from different boards and commissions to basically put it together, take it back to the respective piece, take it, and then bring that back up to the city council.
Yeah, that sounds right.
This is potentially a big project, and as a result, that's part of the reason of hiring a consultant is we have a small staff that has to both process the desires of the city council and what their priorities are, as well as the applicants who have projects that they want us to process for them. So they're, they are the staff to the Historic Preservation Committee. So it sort of all comes together on our staff, but I'm not sure they have the time to do the integrative and process things that would be required. And so that's why I recommend that we hire a consultant who could take these things and then establish some kind of a process that makes sure that the process includes the Historic Preservation Commission and the Building Commission and
So,
I think
new
we can do
laws
that.
and
I
things
think
like
we can do that without a consultant, though. I think we can figure that out probably, through conversations. Initially, I think at some point it's probably a good idea to have a consultant to help put it all together.
Well, if I may, you could also, this commission hasn't really engaged in a subcommittee structure in the
Right.
past, at least in my time with you.
yep,
But two of you could break off, meet outside of this public meeting, study the materials, and come up with a starting point for the commission's conversation of areas that you think that you should focus on and to help the direction of the commission's discussion and recommendation to council.
yeah.
So that option is always available to you. 3 is a quorum, so it has to be a subcommittee of 1 or 2. I would probably recommend 2 for this magnitude of a task. to talk it out and work through it, but it's within your discretion to do that.
Could it include 2 from other commissions?
There's no reason that you couldn't meet with other people as the ad hoc and talk to them as experts. It wouldn't be as formal as what you're talking about, but you could meet with other experts, right, to help understand the direction. I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, to get to Commissioner Graham's point about, I think you were talking about subcommittees potentially being vetted through city council. That's if staff's going to be involved in that process.
Right.
And there have been those times, housing was one of them, where we took that to city council and said, hey, we want to do 2 members and then have staff kind of help us through that. And they said yes. So you've got to go through that to kind of get that formal blessing. Because we are spread thin, to be fair. But if we are dedicating time, obviously there's an importance and it's become a priority.
There may be an option to, if the consultant ends up being expensive, of a path for exploring whether my office could support if council approved the additional funding for that. Because if the request was put on staff, my office would be heavily involved to do something like that. And we do have the expertise with the city, right, and the familiarity with the city to be helpful in crafting an ordinance that's appropriate for Ojai.
Yeah, okay. And just to make sure I'm understanding the ask too, or what we're talking about. We're talking about the current guidelines that we have now. We haven't really talked about any discussion west of South Ventura Street. So do we?
Well, that was my question though.
Want to talk about that too?
I mean, coupled within that, wouldn't you, I mean, you could also think about,
Going west?
I mean, we should talk about it, we should talk about it right now anyways, but in this, within the kind of context of this potential, maybe a subcommittee or some other conversations, there's no reason it wouldn't be, yeah, it's about the document, but it could also be about the extents of the zone that the document is
Yeah, how
considering.
how far it goes.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm, just so I'm clear, we're talking about one master plan that goes from
Gridley.
Oak Glen, looks,
It's Gridley,
is it Gridley?
yeah.
Oh, Gridley. It goes, okay, yeah, to Gridley, all the way to where?
33.
It's far, I don't know. I don't know if that would
No,
work.
Ventura
but-
Street, not Ventura.
That's what I thought you meant, but that's all.
It's a good answer. No, I think all the way, it's gotta go to the.
To Vaughn's.
Yeah, to Vaughn's,
Well,
to
right now,
33.
right now it goes.
It goes to Ventura Street.
Yeah, but we're saying where would we want it to go?
Where would the west go?
I think that this is something that the public really needs to get involved with.
100%.
When we
Yeah.
had the discussion regarding the inn and the architectural changes that they wanted to make, there was a lot of public input, many supporting what the inn wanted to do, but there were also people who said, we want the mission revival. So I don't feel qualified at this point to say we should have it from Vaughn's to Gridley. That's a
But I
big
don't think it
stretch.
has to mean Mission Revival all the way to Vaughn's. But I think, because I think it's clear in a lot of these, there's discussion about continuity of a type, but also transition, and, you know, like, I think there are elements, you know, I mean, I guess taking a step back, there's style. That's not the only thing that's in here, of course, you know, and I think that there's elements within it that are bigger than the style. The style is great for the image of the city, but the other elements around, you know, I guess like
Give me an example.
adjacencies, parking or
No
sort of
parking out in the front of the building.
yeah, or the relationship of buildings, you know, or maybe it's nice to have them really tight in some areas, maybe it's not nice. How do the setbacks work? What's the rhythm of the street? What's the what's sort of the what's just the mass and proportions and scale of the buildings?
General guidelines, general architecture.
Yeah, like are these, is a two-story thing in, you know, congruent or incongruent and landscaping, so, and then it's also, I think, you know, there's like ideas about walkable environments,
Mhm.
views in open spaces. And then there's then there's kind of ways in which I think things about, fire safety
Mhm.
can be baked into it. So I think that's a way to, it's maybe it's like
We just
opening it
went
up.
from combining 3 little plans to revamping the city. I thought, that's a huge leap, guys.
All I mean when I say west, all the way to Vaughn's and 33 is essentially if we're going to apply any design standards west, we should think about it all the way down to that. piece, yeah.
It makes sense to me, it really does, but I'm just a little overwhelmed at the size of the project that it has become.
We may find-
So, the subcommittee of 2, I've already got that figured out.
If you've got if you have a public process as part of whatever this consolidation is, the extension of whatever this document is to take in new areas could be part of that public process. Or could be there's no demand for it in the abstract. There was, because people were fond, it may be, that people were fond of the architecture of the
Right. The
of
town, the winery.
tasting room, the winery. And that was what the driver was, and it was essentially a spot zoning we really liked. We want to keep that as opposed to, when you look at it, we've got sort of from Ventura Boulevard, or not Boulevard, but Street, west, you've got a real melange of building types there with parking in front, parking in back, board and batten, there's all sorts of stuff there, including Spanish, but not predominantly Spanish.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, and maybe it's worth digging into, and maybe it's not. In other words, there's not that much development to be done down there. So what problem are we solving? Because we're not going to. It's not as if we have a big development that's going to take place down there, because there's just not enough land to do it on. So.
Well, I think whether we like it or not, development to some degree is inevitable. And so it's our job to kind of think a little bit down the road for that, in a sense, and I think probably the fact that there are this melange and there is parking in front and these sorts of things is because it hadn't been considered. It didn't seem important enough. And, that ended up being a big part of that conversation with the winery was, well, now, like, what's this entry to Ojai like? Yeah, it's lovely once you hit the museum, basically, let's say, that's your ideal, then that's when it starts, And so everything before is you're just like driving in or whatever. And talking about walkability or, different business opportunities or, whatever, I think could play into it.
Okay, so I'm gathering that we want to look for staff to help us with some sort of proposal to city council regarding,
Subcommittee.
or we look at just doing a subcommittee and looking at this thing, a little deeper. Maybe that makes more sense. Then we can engage HPC. So let's do that. I think we should look at creating a subcommittee.
Seems like a good start.
Yeah, good start. And we can include HPC, make sure we cover.
As you're saying, maybe it's too lofty, maybe it's too much, or maybe it makes sense.
Yeah, but I do like the idea of trying to come up with one general plan aligning with our overall general plan that overlays kind of across, the whole Ojai Avenue corridor. Because I think there is a need for that. I was just reading Santa Barbara, they just came out with theirs, and they have objective design standards all throughout their downtown. And I know objective standards is something that we need to look at too, as a group. So maybe that's something that we can also put into this, is more objective standards. Because I know that, we could kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Oh, the project.
Well, hold on.
Think Lucas.
The objective design standards, while it's not on the agenda, it still fits within guidelines components.
Yep.
But only hits certain
types
of uses and isn't like what we're talking about here.
Okay.
This is really more inclusive within the areas that we're
Targeting.
yes.
But doesn't
Although I am
include- does
supportive,
include-
as your legal counsel, of creating objective standards that
Yeah, I was
everybody
gonna
can
say.
understand,
Does
instead of in the discretion of,
Because like you
the
think for
director.
setbacks, or you think of the space between buildings, those can be subjective, like, hey, we want everyone to line up. Well, what does that mean? Or they can be objective.
Yeah,
We
they
want
speak to
everybody to be 5
streetscape.
feet from the street. We want everybody to be 5 feet from each other. So.
Those are
yes.
objective, yes.
See, so we need to have objective.
There's
standards.
bits and pieces, sure. It rears its head, I agree.
Okay, good.
The last person who advocated
We just put 'em in
putting
wherever a
together
proposal is.
Yeah. there you go.
specific and measurable rules was Jeffrey Starkweather when he was on this commission and supported that. I just want to register that I'm not necessarily supportive of it because I worry about lacking the ability to be creative. And if a powerful creative statement is something that the community would benefit from, I don't necessarily want to have everything all buttoned up, and so we're trying to move towards a completely homogeneous community, and making everything very specific tends to can homogenize the look and feel of a community. So.
I hear where you're coming from. I think that there's a space where there's room for the objectivity that you're talking about, and then there's room for the subjectivity that you're talking about, as long as we stay within the boundaries of not being arbitrary and capricious about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a
We'll give them a menu of choices.
yes, it's a scale, right, and a range possibly, but that's the difficulty in writing law, right? Is you're specific enough that everybody knows what to do, but vague enough that you capture as many of the possibilities that can happen as possible, because we can't possibly conceive of every possible instance, right, that something will come up. So I think it sounds like there's a path forward for you here, the subcommittee route, and coming back and reporting on it is great.
Yeah, and Lucas, in order to form this subcommittee, oh, I apologize, you were going to speak.
Please.
In order to form this subcommittee, do we have to go through council and seek their approval? Just if we need to utilize city resources?
City resources, yes.
Start with
If you're,
without-
If you're going to use the staff.
If we find that we need to have staff, we come back and ask for it, but at least this way we get off the ground right away.
I'm with you on that.
I would
So
recommend
who
that, yeah.
wants to sit on this subcommittee? We can have up to 2, but we need at least 1. And I do think that this person or people should reach out to HPC and, get together and start the process.
All right, who's raising their hand?
I mean,
You guys.
I'd be willing. Yes.
May I just,
would.
All right, we got
Robbie,
one, Jonathan.
with just
Jonathan's on.
with one exception, I think that since the Historic Preservation Commission is dealing with a small subset of this land and of these buildings, I think that the subcommittee here needs to meet and figure out, because a lot of it, I think, yes, absolutely, this committee should integrate with the Historic Preservation Subcommittee, but I'm not sure at the beginning
Right.
when it's being scoped. And
Right.
since the scope of this is gonna go beyond areas where there's a district and there are buildings in relationship to each other that are part of the historic fabric, that we bring in the Historic Preservation Commission, after a few meetings with yourselves, and when you have scoped the thing and can see when and where various elements can be added.
For clarity, I have no interest in being a part of the subcommittee. I think it's the way to move forward on being able to do this. But I personally don't want to be on it. So, would you be willing to be on it? Is it
I
just
wish-
going to be him,
Subcommittee one.
which is fine. But I'm wondering.
It's really not.
You want to,
No, I'm not
volunteer?
volunteering. But to dump this all into one person's lap when it's a huge
This is a huge deal. It is a huge deal, and we don't have to go the subcommittee route. We can,
Yep.
we can go seek guidance from
Speak in your microphone,
sorry.
please.
We can seek guidance from city council. We can we come back to staff and ask them to help us put together a proposal that we can present to city council, where they can, do a deep dive into this and look to hire resources and get a consultant and, build this thing out. We can go that route. That's just,
Just
takes
wanted,
more time.
I use the term, you get to geek out with some of this stuff. And this is one of those moments, both of these items, if it ends up going down the roads that I'm seeing, especially this one going down with a subcommittee and then potentially more, this is the commission that gets to geek out and get into the details and roll their sleeves up. This is the commission that gets to do that.
It's like Title 10, when we went through Title 10.
Exactly.
That was super
I'm not
fun.
going to say that it was pretty. Title 10 definitely was not pretty.
That was a fun
Right?
one.
But it was a necessary action. Now I feel much better when I'm looking at it and I'm not like, ugh, this bugs me or this bugs me.
Mhm.
Those have been fixed, right? The tinkering has been done to set the table for what we're talking about here and beyond.
Mhm.
So
Where is Steve Quillisi when we need him? Yeah. Speaking of geeking out.
yeah,
All right. So do we have no one else in the subcommittee?
I wish I could do it. I just,
Yeah, I totally get you.
Do we want to go to the subcommittee route then, or do we want to do another proposal?
what are the other options?
Well, the other options are, we direct staff to help us write a proposal for city council, to hire a consulting company to look at this.
that would be a route. The third option that I could put on the table for discussion is at some point you're going to have a joint meeting with the city council.
True.
At that point, you can start tinkering with what this is going to look like and then do your ask
through that process.
through that process.
Makes sense.
Cool.
So you could start with one commissioner, it doesn't sound like there's another, working through that and then bringing back updates. Now I can help with how that gets brought forward. I can't help at this point with the research that goes into that.
Okay, well, barring no other volunteers, I will volunteer myself, Jonathan.
Wow.
I'll help you put this together.
My other question is there a special committee that we would have to go to city council to approve that would make up, members from different boards and commissions that could be a part of something like this before having to draw down city resources?
Democracy gone wild.
I think if if what you're talking about doesn't involve staff resources, I don't think so. It would more involve consent of the other commissions sending a member and everybody agreeing that this is what we're working on. My only concern is doing something that robust without getting direction from council. That's a pretty serious effort that I would want to make sure that you got a check-in from council that this is a direction they want to move in.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking about
Yeah.
going to council, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
would there potentially be someone from the city council representative on this?
That's something you could explore, and like Lucas said, maybe I really like the idea of doing the joint meeting, and this is something that you could talk
Sure.
about with them. That would be a great space to have this type of discussion, and then they could, instead of requesting the other commissions to work with you, they could make the referral to the commissions instead.
Right.
Right, of the part that's within their purview to provide the feedback and come back as one recommendation. It just gets a little sticky when we have one recommendation that's going, and it's not just coming from the planning commission now. Each of the bodies has to agree on that recommendation to council, and that part I think can get complicated if there's disagreement about the recommendation.
Sure.
So to the extent that we can keep it, that you can speak with the experts in have it inform your decision. I think that might be a cleaner path forward. Not to say that you can't do the other way with engaging the other commissions. I just think that we would have to maybe talk about and explore what that looks like, what their involvement would be, and maybe portioning of responsibilities to accomplish the same goal.
So I'm hearing best path forward is subcommittee, then joint meeting with city council to make like a formal recommendation, and then move on, forward from there.
Yeah, so I would say subcommittee that comes back to this body for you to discuss the findings,
Right.
joint meeting, and then, yeah, you can take it from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, anytime.
Is there a joint meeting? Like you said, that's an idea. What kind of timeline are we
So-
imagining?
Typically, this body either has a joint meeting in
Ending.
August or I think April. It's either one of those dates. So it's coming up. So this is if we're gonna do something, this is the time where you're
Okay.
probably gonna want to at least kick the tires and see what's out there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Come up with some sort of strategy.
All right, so we'll close the book on that one. Anybody else? Anything else we want to add? I think we got our subcommittee. Jonathan, you and I will work together.
All right.
And I don't think we need to engage the city. We don't need to engage you guys, right? We can just work together. Okay. we'll do that.
opportunity.
So I'll reach out to you and we'll set something up.
Sounds good, John.
All right, so let's move on to discussion item 3. Lucas, did you have anything on this one? Oh, we got another speaker.
Larry's.
Okay,
Larry's putting together a card.
thank you guys.
Okay.
Yes, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We need to talk after.
This isn't as sexy of an item, but I think it's still a very important. I appreciate this item. You got no name on here.
But that's what I was like.
Where is the opposite?
get everything you can done.
Okay, so putting on our putting our design cap to the side and kind of looking at the logistics of undergrounding. So I'll probably just start the conversation piece, the discussion piece with we have standards very limited in terms of undergrounding, which is typical for most cities. What it boils down to is when the triggering mechanism is when new construction comes in. And what it requires is when new construction comes in, and these are the current standards as we apply them for projects that come in, they're required to underground anything that's on their private property to the nearest pole offsite. They're not required to take that pole and underground that pole. They're just simply required to take that line to that pole. End of story. And that line usually just goes straight up and it remains overhead, but within public right-of-way, not within the private format.
And this is for new builds, remodels,
It's really new builds,
new construction.
new construction. So we don't get a lot of those. I think I put in the report that we get on average like one a year.
Right.
So, and usually that's single family.
Yeah.
So,
And then once it's in the right of way on the street, then it goes straight up, and then that's outside of the purview.
correct.
Got it.
There's not a requirement, or not a requirement, there is not an allowance that if you do a new build, that you can run a power line from the house to the pole.
Correct. No.
You can't do that. You have to underground the wire.
Unless there is an exception that requires you to go to city council for consideration.
Oh,
I think that's the way that reads. Let me just make sure.
that's a surprise.
May waive the requirements of this section if topographical, so it requires site-specific conditions.
To be able to
You get an exception.
string a wire.
Yeah, they're using the term unreasonable or impractical, so those sound like attorney terms.
It's okay.
Objective, it
Lee,
is
it's
not.
okay to trash attorneys.
And actually, it doesn't say city council here. It identifies the city engineer. Determination.
Oh.
That sounds,
So that's really the kind of setting the table. Now, what I heard from this body on the 15th was, great, let's talk about that, but let's also talk about something more than just that, and that is, once it goes to that line, Is there a way in which we can have that line or those lines along that street or area or district underground over some sort of phasing?
Yeah.
The conversation is much more broader than that, and I think it's worth kind of a conversation back and forth in terms of areas that you've seen that in your experience, because I certainly have seen that in cities that I've worked in and played in. So, and then other areas that don't have it. So this is what we have from a standard standpoint as it exists today. It's what we apply today. But then there's the bigger piece, which is really kind of long term. I don't know how you do that in the short term because of the expense involved in it and the time and consideration by the community and certainly council and potentially even utility companies involved in this as well.
I was going to say, is there anybody who can bring us up to speed as to what is typical when a community wants to underground? And does the utility have any obligations, or do they participate in that because they get the benefit of having a safer system and therefore remove liability that they would?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting conversation because you will talk to utility companies and they'll talk about the negativity of undergrounding versus the positives that come with that from a community standpoint. And there's pros and cons to it.
Right.
Obviously, from the utility standpoint, they still maintain it. But then that leads to the other potential discussion that we could have tonight, which is taking over ownership of those utilities within the jurisdictional boundaries and what that potentially looks like as well.
When I proposed this to you a few months ago,
Yeah.
this is exactly it.
Yeah, this is that kind of bigger discussion. Now, we can boil it down, but I think it's important that we start there and kind of tease out how far we go with this discussion and see where it goes from there. But those are the 2 points that I kind of wanted: the undergrounding of the utilities that are within the public right of way, all utilities within the public, because it's not just Edison, it's others.
By the way, is there another electric company besides Edison?
No,
or the city?
for us within this area.
Right, it's all Edison.
It's Edison.
Yeah.
What are the negatives other than cost from the utilities' point of view? What are they saying?
Well, one that I have heard in having conversations with them is the access and maintenance of those utilities is pretty costly. But one could argue then, to the contrary, almost immediately, is that you no longer have utility lines when it's a windy event, when you have a wind event, having tree lines knock those over and then creating.
And what's the cost ratio of barely having to maintain them versus, the time that you do versus the regularity?
That is an excellent
of having to maintain
question
them?
that I do not have an answer for.
Well,
Well,
and
it's not really a
now-
question for
And
you.
now
Okay.
things like,
I mean,
good.
like insurance costs, our
Right.
insurance is just gone up by 50%, and they're telling us that we'll be lucky if they write insurance for us at all next year. So, there is a cost to the consumer as well as
That's
a
right.
cost to the electric company, and the electric company is passing along all of these costs of upgrading the system
Yeah.
to us anyway.
I'm from Northern California. PG&E had 6 rate hikes last year. They're already asking, for more this year, 2025. And I grew up in a small town called Roseville. When I was growing up there, it was like 26,000 to 35,000 roughly. Now it's like 135,000, something crazy. But back then, we had Roseville Electric for a small community that the city owned. They still do. And I looked at the rate prices today. It's like 14 cents a kilowatt for like the first tier versus PG&E's, which is 40 cents a kilowatt, right? And so they're, almost 3 times cheaper than, the big electricity company up there. And as I think about the future of Ojai, I think it makes sense for us to underground all utilities, because when we have these wind events, right? We've seen the Thomas Fire down, power line in Santa Paula caused this historic fire that threatened our community and honestly did a lot of damage. Also, a few weeks ago, when the down power line on Fox Street hit, like hundreds of people were without power for almost 2 days. And I think like in Miners Oaks, there are hundreds of other people who also didn't have power for almost 2 days. And so there are multiple benefits here from just like protecting our community from different, natural events, as well as if we pay for the undergrounding of the utilities over the course of 10 years through some sort of bond or other measure, for us to be able to provide, cost-effective, electricity to our residents and hopefully other members in the valley, that help just reduce the cost of living for everyone here, because we're all feeling that burden with insurance or our utilities during the summer months, right? And this is just something that's like really near and dear to my heart. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for bringing this up and getting it on the discussion items.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, something like this that's going to obviously require council's involvement. From a planning commission standpoint, like what would be the best approach to something like this? Like it would be a requirement of like a design standard when they're putting in new poles or they're maintaining, or like
Don't say subcommittee.
Yeah, no subcommittee. I could see where we could come in like as a long-term solution to different planning as different things come on board, but to replace things that are currently existing, I don't know if that's in a planning purview, is it?
Well, it could roll into the design standards in a way that we were talking about.
Yeah, and like 20 years down the road, as the new things come on, and like you said, we're always building, things are always happening, so eventually.
One residence a year.
It'll
take more than 20 years.
It'll take a long time, but eventually it would get there. But to do something in the shorter term, which we probably need to do from a safety aspect, and just from overall greater good of the community, how would the planning commission go about doing something like that? Recommendation to council, or what would be the best approach?
Procedural place, yes.
Yeah.
It would be a recommendation to council. It could also be an item that you bring forward during the joint meeting.
In a joint meeting.
But I think even more importantly is succinctly coming up with the trigger points that this body is wanting to really focus on, and seeing if there's traction from the majority of council. I think that's the big piece. What could be the what could be the trigger piece? I think there's a bunch of different things that could be triggers. One could be if they're replacing a pole.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, maintenance.
We're seeing that on a regular basis. I'm reviewing them on a daily basis right now. So it's happening a lot. And the other thing is if for instance, go ahead.
Does that mean that, okay, you're replacing a pole, you have to underground that element, or while you're replacing that pole, you also have to put 50 feet of conduit in the ground for the eventual running of this line?
It could be either or both.
Okay.
I do want
I don't know
to.
how strict you would want to
We
be.
want the whole street done if they do one pole.
Take it to the nearest pole.
I'm
at
worried
least.
that Southern California Edison's been replacing poles at an unbelievable clip, and unfortunately, this would have been a good idea, I think, 5 years ago. But right now, we have a lot of brand new poles all over the place.
We also have a lot of poles that aren't new.
Yeah, that's true.
fine.
That's true. I'm surprised, though, to hear that in sort of contemporary life. I know, for instance, Pasadena has a power and electric company that also generates power as well as distributes it, and it's a municipal utility. But I thought that for the most part, that stuff was. Towns were getting out of that business. So I'm surprised to hear that it pencils out. I know I get on my bill, my electric bill, a distribution fee and a generation fee. So I'm paying for those lines along the road to get the power to our house. And
I'll give you two more examples. Northern California, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. They also provide electricity, SMUD, to a lot of residents in the Sacramento area, and not just like Sacramento proper. As well as, these are all communities I've lived in, by the way. East Bay Municipal Utility District, also providing like, you know, to all of the East Bay, like Oakland, Berkeley, you know, electricity and other utilities that are at a cheaper rate than PG&E or Southern California Edison. So I don't think it's fair to say communities are getting out of it. I do think that the problem we're going to have is being able to afford undergrounding utilities as a city, and like actually making it cost effective for just the city of Ojai, because we're such a small community. But I do think it's worth the exploration.
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
sure there's a vendor who sells systems
Well, it
that
could be
would
like,
love to come and talk to us.
If you're asking me to be on the subcommittee, yeah.
We have a subcommittee?
I don't know what's supposed to happen in that, but I see you looking at me with the same look on the design standards. Yeah. I will say my wife is pregnant with her second child. She's due in May. Thank you. I will be very busy. So, you know, just tempering expectations. But yeah, this is something I'd love to bring up to the city council during a joint meeting. The other piece about that,
but it could, the municipal could be like Casita. I mean, it could be the valley.
oh, that was the other piece.
Yeah, it's
So it's
gotta be
not,
the
it's
valley.
not just gonna be
You
the
can't-
city,
We
it's the
can't,
whole.
we can't just do this, it's gotta be the valley, because I mean, we're part of one ecosystem. The valley is a large,
If
you
you're
know.
talking about generation, it makes sense to have it be the whole valley, but if you're just talking about distribution, you could do that in Ojai.
That's true.
Yeah, you could, but we're talking about burying the lines themselves.
But also
I'm
just
saying
the-
distribution in
Yeah.
Ojai, you could do that.
Yeah.
But if the goal
maybe
is
if the
fire threat-
generation, that might be a bigger.
I think undergrounding, we can only speak to the city of Ojai's like limits, right? If we want to do something else, we would have to go to the county because those are unincorporated areas. But I do agree with like Casitas Valley Water or Casitas Water District, right? It's like, and then the east end also has their own water district. And so why can't we provide electricity the way that they're providing water to unincorporated areas outside of Ojai? Sure.
Lucas, I
Just checking in to see how this
yeah,
is going
any thoughts?
over.
I cut you off though. We were talking about the triggers, and we only got through one. And I was curious. It would be nice to think about the layers of triggers that might be in our sort of, I guess.
The nice thing about triggers is when they're in my head, they're great. I don't remember the rest of them. I had like 2 or 3 of them that I was
About
thinking of.
street paving. Anytime we do street paving, we
Oh,
gotta.
now
When
that
you
we've
open
just
up the
just
street.
finished.
Yeah.
Missed that one.
There's a number of different and interesting ideas that could be plugged in, and I'm open to any and all.
Any trigger, though, if we're going to create a municipality for this, we should own those lines. We should bear the responsibility of those costs.
Close the-
And so my fear of putting in a trigger event that puts a trigger on SoCal Edison is that they would have to bear those costs, and then they would not want to like actually do that or maintain it. Or if they did, then they would be more reluctant to actually relinquish, you know, the right to those underground utilities. So.
Well, big picture, I mean, to that point, I agree with you because the cost of the burden of the cost of something like this is significant,
Yeah.
It's
Very
huge.
large.
and it's the reason why you trail it out lots of years. But there is the pro and con piece, which can be teased out over the span of a couple meetings as we're talking through this, and a potential partnership with Edison potentially. I just don't know what that looks like, because that could be something that just takes away some of those triggers, and it just becomes, hey, we're doing this phasing plan. You know what I mean? Like it's something that could be big enough,
We'll bury it, you maintain it, kind of thing?
something like that.
Totally agree. And over those 10 years, 15 years, it's not like Ojai's providing that electricity. So there has to be that natural partnership that's there with them. So I would love to explore how you actually work with them.
Yeah, there's a couple of cities that I have been involved in that own the lines. San Jacinto is one of them that's in Riverside. And I think Riverside, I can reach out to a couple of planners to see if that's still true, but at one point they had owned at least half the lines. They had done it in some sort of phased approach where they were looking to own the line so they controlled the electricity.
Cool.
Well, Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles,
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's a big one.
you know, it owns everything, I believe, except the run from, if it's a pole provided from the pole to the house, or if it's an underground provided from the
Are you
underground.
interested in reaching out to them and having that
No.
question?
It's hilarious.
The ones that I'm
But-
thinking of are the ones that I can easily get. I have friends in those
Or
areas,
water
planner
power's
friends that I
big,
know
don't
of.
know.
Yeah.
Where you would go.
I do think we should focus on communities that have gone through the transition of having, you know, a private utility transferring over. And I am happy to, if you guys give me recommendations, I'm happy to make some calls. Yes, so.
Yes.
By all means.
San Jacinto, I'm almost for certain that they did that maybe 10 years. They started doing that maybe 10 years ago.
Cool. I've written them down, yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you guys, can we open up to public comment? All right. Mr. Miley, we got one public card? Two public cards. Oh, do I have another one here? Oh, look at that, I do have two. Sorry.
Stuck so perfectly
Yeah.
together.
Hello.
Hello.
History of the downtown, as I remember it,
Hilarious.
it's been above ground utility free for years. What, 40 years? 50 years?
Downtown, downtown corridor?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
You
you're
come
right.
down
It is.
Ojai Avenue from the Y,
Mm-hmm.
there's no wires.
Yeah. No,
So
it's
where are the damn poles?
like that
They
for-
must not have any electricity here. And at one point in my family's life, we lived in Golden West, and that doesn't have any poles.
Mhm.
So the city has been foresighted for years.
Just takes a long time.
I think we should take that and clap and give ourselves an appreciation for doing that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a natural place to start the extension from.
Absolutely.
So everything that happens new is underground,
Yeah.
unless it's within a area that's already has above-ground poles. You have to underground your own utility line from the pole to the house.
Correct.
And I would think anybody that wants to do that now can do that, right?
Mhm.
They could say, I want to put my wires underground from your pole to me.
I mean,
I had a tree fall on my power line
Yeah.
just this last
Yeah.
month or so.
I think you could.
So I
do
had no
that.
power. That would have taken care of that. So that's a really good idea. Okay. So it seems to me that the issue of undergrounding present above ground utilities is a huge cost.
Mhm.
And the utilities will pass it on. You know, they are obligated to do it. They'll end up doing it and they'll take their 5% profit and put the costs on us. Okay. That's the way I see it. Also, it's a huge disruption in the community. Streets are all going to be being dug up, etc. But recently, in the last 2 years, Edison has come along and put new power poles on all over.
Mhm.
We had them on North Signal Street, new lines. So I don't think they're going to fall down when the wind blows. These aren't. So my opinion is, regarding undergrounding above ground utility lines, it's unlikely that we need it and unnecessary based on current above ground technology in Ojai, at least on my street. I think it's all over Ojai. So I would suggest that the minimum would be to encourage owners to underground their own from the pole to the house. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Mr. Steingold, you are up.
Thank you. There are no lines in Golden West. There are no lines north of me on Pleasant. There are no lines above ground on Ojai Avenue. How much will it cost? If you went to the electric company and asked them, they'd give you a number. I think we need that number, because then you have a starting point. Do you want to buy the electric company and become Casitas Electric? Get a number for that too. It's a number, that's all it is. All right, how much do you want? What's it cost? Then you can have a baseline. All right, I have wires and a new telephone pole, which they plugged up and flipped it in the air, behind my house between the lots. I have trees they come in, they cut. Want to stop fires? Let's get rid of all the trees in the right-of-way where the pole wires go through the trees, and just get rid of the trees. Then there'll be less fire, but nobody wants to do that. So will people pay more to have the lines underground? Ask them. Why go through all this aggravation? Because this conversation's going on, I don't know how many decades, obviously since Golden West, and obviously since north of Pleasant.
At least since 2004.
Right, okay, and it goes on all over the country. Just get a number. I mean, is it 1,000 a foot? Is it 500 a foot? You know, what's the deal? And I think you need a subcommittee of stakeholders, okay? Because if you only have the same people on the committee, you keep getting the same answers, and you get no creativity, all right? Especially if you have historical and planning, you already know where people stand, so maybe you should reach out to the public. But get a price from the electric company, and they'll tell you exactly, well, more or less.
Just an observation, because
Yes,
I
sir.
have friends who've attempted to have the electric company do something, and I do agree with you, and that is that Southern California Edison manages to make it infinitely more expensive than a independent process to achieve the same result.
I'm
So
sure
I don't know how you go about.
I'm sure it,
I mean, I know, yes, you can call Southern California Edison, the regional vice president, and say, would you tell me what the number is to convert this? They'd love to do that. They'd love to own that infrastructure. They want to be in the business of
Okay.
delivering infrastructure to it. They don't want to see it go to someone else.
right, so it's a number, and then at least you'll be able to
They have a
go
number,
to
but-
another company and say, look,
Right.
what can you provide for the same specs, because you're a subcontractor of the electric company, and you're the guys who run the piping through. What's the number? from
Or
you.
is there an institution like Casitas
Right.
Municipal Water District that would like to be water and power as
Right.
opposed to
Right.
just
But
water?
again, it's, yes, and it's just,
And these other little towns that have done this,
Yeah.
I mean, they probably have experience in comparing the cost between the utility and private contractors.
Sure.
it's only a number.
I think you guys are on to something. Buy it first, and then spend the 10, 20 years undergrounding everything.
Or just mandated upon sale, where it goes, the owner's gotta take it from his house from the pole to the house, just mandated on sale, just like everything else. Fire hardened, mandated upon sale, electrification efficiency, mandated upon sale.
And so you're talking about on the residential properties
Yeah, commercial
or
too.
commercial? I'm thinking,
Everything, residential, investment apartments.
thinking the
everything. You
infrastructure.
Just do it and see what happens, and if people flip out, you amend it.
But if you see the documents here, which talk about development and what's interesting and needed by the community, view sheds are very important. We've dealt with view sheds half a dozen
What's a
times
view
in the
sh- a
last,
view- a
in the
view
last
shed?
year. View sheds.
Your view.
Your
Oh,
view.
the view of,
The view of the mountains
oh, yeah,
around
well,
us.
if that's what it's all,
And,
that's, I know.
and there is embodied in these documents, and in, AT&T came because they wanted to put something on their roof and down here.
So-
And so there is a desire to open up the views from blockages, and one of the blockages is the industrial blockage of having Southern California Edison lines running all over the place.
So it's not a lack of desire, it's a lack of will to say, upon this will occur, and that's just the way it is, because everybody wants a view. So you're gonna bury the lines, and there's a cost to that, and that applies to the homeowner.
All
Shit.
I'm saying is there's something more than just fire.
Right,
as a
yeah.
driver on
But
this.
100%.
It's a much more attractive community if you don't have the poles and the wires.
Right, no, I get it, and I got a big pole in back of me, like it's like New York, with like, I don't know how many houses are pulling off of that one pole.
Every day when I walk my dog or my baby, it's one or the other, never at the same time.
You will.
I see, it's just too hard.
Wait.
Yeah.
It's gonna get harder.
I have that same issue. Like even just from a walkability perspective, you know, the view shed is diminished because when you look up at the mountains, you are constantly seeing the power lines. So I agree with you from a beautification standpoint, which is how we would get to city council to make a recommendation like this. It makes a lot of sense.
So
Yeah,
let's,
cheers.
Shall we start with fire hardening,
Can I
because
make-
that's
Well,
on
both.
everybody's
I'm gonna get
mind.
all right,
Definitely.
Larry, go ahead.
One last
more-
thing.
One last thing.
If you could just make a decision to say, we want, this is going to occur, and this is part of what's going to happen, and see what happens. Because if you don't start, we're gonna have committees and commissions, and things take forever, and it's like, what do you want to do? Bury the lines? Fine. Then tell them you want the lines buried, and there's a cost, and it's gonna apply to the homeowner, or it's not. Or we're gonna buy but it's frustration. Because you have the desire, we all have the desire.
We got you.
Well, okay, now let's,
We'll figure out a path forward.
yeah, but
Okay.
I got you.
before we're,
Yeah. Thank you, sir. All right, no more public comment? We good? Anybody online?
No,
Nope, okay. Okay, cool. So I think we've got a general consensus that we would like to bring something forward to city council, probably during that joint meeting. And you mentioned triggers, that we need to come up with some sort of triggering mechanisms that we need to present to them. I wrote down maintenance of the poles, street paving, and then obviously upon sale
Oh,
of the house.
street paving.
Yeah, is there any other triggers?
And then within that, the design elements like view sheds and the attractiveness of the city and retention of trees.
In the design standard that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. But within the, I think also reason that it could go, why it's worth talking to city council.
Okay. All right, so what do we need to do for that direction to city council? We just bring it up to them? We just,
Well, but here's the thing, if you bring it up to city council without vetting or at least showing that you've done some work, you've got to do a little bit of research.
yeah.
And what does that look like? I'm gonna need to be told, like, hey, you should do X, Y, and Z, so that I can.
Well, my first question is, and I think this was brought up by the community, there are areas in the city that are already undergrounded,
Yeah,
right? So we already have like a playbook
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
where we can check boxes off and say, it's not the entire city.
Right.
It's actually 60%. I don't know. Whatever that percentage looks like, right?
And then from there, we can understand phases, phasing out, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We're gonna extend naturally from those areas that are already underground. So you're not creating like another oasis in the city. You're actually moving everything towards each other. And maybe we can connect downtown to Golden West or something like that. Okay. Sorry.
No, you're good, you're good. I was just thinking about like, when those were put underground, it was probably during some sort of new development.
Yep.
And so that, finding out when this development was originally put in the code, was it 2004 or was it older?
This was not in there prior to. And in fact, I found staff reports from before 2004 that talked about the potential for undergrounding utility districts.
All right.
Cool.
Just never
Yeah.
ended up going anywhere because this ended up happening instead.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, cool. So next steps, Richard, you want to do some digging on this thing?
My name's Robert.
Robert? I did it again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. 3 strikes. I get one more.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert.
Again, it's like maybe coming. Time will be limited, but doesn't mean I can't sprint for a little bit on this.
Okay, cool.
Lucas will reach out.
Remember, I can only help so much with something like
I would
this.
just love
but,
access to like the research that you already found, or at least like pointing me in the right direction.
and the nice
I don't
thing
need
is
you
I'll
to
just
do the
clarify,
work.
it's not research.
Yeah.
This These are just people that I know, and like I had conversations at a recent APA conference, and we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Can you make a phone call to a
Yeah, I have
fellow
I have a
planner?
couple of planner friends that I can reach out to. For sure, and I'll share them with you.
Yeah,
I can do that, yes.
Awesome.
Good.
All right, let's move on. So we've got item 4, which is future agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to discuss fire hardening tonight?
No, that was part of our original conversation that we had with the design standards. We were incorporating some fire hardening pieces in there, so that was part of it. But Lucas made a good point that most of the fire hardening practices are part of Title 9, which is building. So we're Title 10, but we're going to try to mix in elements of that fire hardening into the design standards that
Where
we
we
were
can.
talking about. Where we can, exactly.
One example being landscaping.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about landscaping and that sort of thing. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, cool. Future agenda items.
All right. So,
Cabin Village comes back.
geez, you
Oh,
just brought
boy.
it up. So here's the item for the 19th. There was originally going to be 2 items. That second item has been pushed to the 5th. It's just not ready yet.
Thank you for doing that.
You're
Good.
welcome.
gonna be a lot.
But that item is gearing up. So sharpen your pencil for a riveting discussion.
Yep.
And I think it's important that this body understands that you're a recommendation body to City Council.
Yep.
We do.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that. March 5th, both of these items I anticipate will be ready. Noticing is required. Both of them are second-story additions, so.
Excuse me, is Cabin Village likely to draw a large crowd, and do we need to do
We're
that
going to
in
be in
Kent
the
Hall?
other.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so normally we're here.
Mm-hmm.
The noticing for Cabin Village has already gone out, and in the noticing, we're identifying Kent Hall.
Yep.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
And then, so the 19th, I don't have anything on there.
I do have a question regarding our 19th. Typically, we get our packet on the Friday before the
Oh, for February, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, for February. We usually get the packet on the Friday before the Wednesday of that meeting. Is there any possible we could get it earlier than that Friday?
How much earlier?
As early as you can get it to us.
I will.
It's gonna be meaty, and the more time we have, the better.
Yeah, so it's moving along really wonderfully. So there is the possibility that we could get it to you maybe up to a week in advance.
That would be fantastic.
Okay.
That'd be very helpful.
I will unfortunately be out of town in a place where there is no service. It is my best friend's bachelor party.
Oh, good for you.
4-day snowmobiling trip in Upper Michigan where there's no cell reception. So I did not plan this.
Oh.
I'm letting you know.
You're just attending.
Yeah, I wish I could. Could be here for that.
No worries.
Yeah. No, I'm here for a reason. So, but I do realize maybe I'm looking out.
Yeah, if you're, if you have any comments that you want to pass along, feel free.
Yes, when you get the packet,
Yeah.
if you want to write up your comments, we will.
Yeah.
Deliver
no,
them.
We appreciate it. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. I leave the 15th.
Okay.
So maybe I get 1-2 days with the packet.
Are you saying a week? early?
Yeah, so yeah, you would have.
You'd have
We
a couple
can we can still, even though you're not going to be here, we can still send it to you. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
The 19th I've left open, and I'm going to identify why. I will not be at that meeting, so there will be somebody else at that meeting, or we just don't have that meeting.
How
Wait,
crushing or how much pressure on the pending items is
Oh,
there?
March 19th.
Is leaving that open and not having a meeting a reasonable choice?
The Vaughn sign has not officially fully resubmitted yet, so it's not ready. 502 South Montgomery Avenue, swimming pool. Oh, that's interesting. That one is far from being ready.
Ugh.
1440 Daily is, I say this every time, I almost feel like I'm jinxing it when I say that. Okay, I'm just not going to. It's still pending.
It's being worked on.
He's pending.
Yeah.
So why don't we leave March 19th open unless something comes up urgently
Okay.
that needs attention?
Well, the other thought is knowing that I just won't be available. I will be out in the woods with no service is really what that boils down to.
This is getting
It's a
to be
good
a little
time.
much.
In Northern
Yeah.
But this one's in California.
You guys going together?
No, this one's in California. It's my daughter's got this trip apparently with this school, and so I decided to chaperone, and I didn't realize that it was on a week that was a planning commission week. But here's the thing: if there is a need for us to have a meeting, we can always call a special meeting. That's always on the table. So
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And we used to do that more.
we did that when we had a log jam of projects where it was like 10 or 12 that were really trying to move forward, and we were having meetings almost every week. So I can just say with confidence we don't have a log jam right now. So the future items for planning commission workshop program items,
Mhm.
I do not have noise on here for consideration.
Yeah.
Is there an interest by this body to have it on a future?
Yeah, I'd recommend it. I just need a second, right?
Yes.
You second it?
Okay, so Murphy and Trent?
Yeah.
All right, very good.
Cool.
We'll add this to the future and
Awesome.
then schedule.
Thank
I
you.
will say this, I do think, obviously for the 19th, we're not going to have one of these items on here, but I think for the 5th, we'll have a third item just to have it for you to discuss. One of these items for the planning commission work program items. So we'll probably squeeze one in. If you're absolutely exhausted after those two items, obviously we can just talk about it briefly, but it's at least to get the wheels turning for a discussion for something that's not applicant driven.
Got it.
I have two other ones that I'm just curious what people think about.
Mhm.
One is parking,
Mhm.
which maybe it's kind of a part of this bigger thing, so I don't know if we need to, but
Well, we've definitely had it on a agenda item before in the past, and we've had a subcommittee on it in the past. Both of those kind of just went by the way of the dodo bird.
Kind of went, yeah.
Yeah, the city council actually ended up adopting the parking, but I think that was with the prior council. So I'm not sure where that's at.
Okay.
You know where the parking conversation is?
Well, if you want, we can add this to the agenda and we can talk about the history of
Yeah,
the parking and the
let's do
parking
that.
studies. And
I'm-
there's a whole bunch of interesting pieces to unpack. We have 2 new members.
Yeah,
Probably the entire group here is just interested in the history, and I can go through that.
yeah, parking's always been a hot topic.
a topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It helps to set the table in terms of because there will be projects that'll come up
Oh, for sure.
where this
Yeah.
very question will come to call.
Yeah.
So it's good to have some of that context and background.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And you said a
So you-
couple.
Well, I
Hold
don't-
on, if it
Yeah,
is
so
parking, I do
parking
need someone
second.
else.
We did
Okay.
a second, we got a second. Okay, so we're good there.
I don't know how this one, I mean, it's like walkability. It's like how walkable is the city.
Mhm.
It's a little complex, but it's like,
That biking group.
sure.
I
We've done that for
I
years.
could use a briefing on the discontinuity of the pedestrian walkways
Sure.
in the city and why some places we have it and some places we don't.
So
and
that could be, that's
why-
one
why it
piece
comes
of
to
it.
Why they come
Yeah.
to an end,
Yeah.
and who's responsible
Yeah, yeah.
for getting it paved or.
We also have a general lack of benches.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think a staff report more than anything to sort of bring us up to speed of why our sidewalk situation is as desperate as it is.
Could you help scope out what the walkability discussion might look like?
I see where Bennett's going, but I think yours is beyond just the.
Yeah, it's also more just like, what is it, what I guess within the sort of design guidelines and within the commission is kind of in like, it's spoken throughout here in like a sort of abstract way, even in what we looked at tonight. So how do these design guidelines, or how do things about, I guess, zoning and thinking about it, either help or, hinder the walkability of Ojai.
Oh, no, I mean, there's definitely, like, new urban design standards and ideas that help
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
idea.
So that's
right.
that's more what I'm.
Yeah.
Lucas,
But I think that's. you
there's
know,
also a complete streets policy on the city's website.
Oh, that's right, yeah, complete streets, that's part of it.
part of it too.
Sherry speaks well.
So
It's actually a good point.
Voice.
So I think
walkability,
walkability, but through the complete streets, see what's in that.
yes.
Just like what we did with the design guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give a lot of information for you to pour through and understand, and its applicability in terms of how it applies throughout the city.
I mean, it was driven home to me when we were looking at the Capri issue and the parking up there and how they were gonna have an empty lot between several of the hotels up there, the motels in the East End. And I had to walk, and you had to walk out onto the street, onto Ojai Avenue, onto the street itself, because there was no sidewalk. And in fact, plants had been put in the very place that a sidewalk should have been
Well,
there. And so, you know, how do we, why did that happen, and where do we go with it, and how do we fix it? Because I would think, for instance, that we'd want to have a walkable city all the way up to the Capri, and that there are patches of sidewalk, but there are also patches of just dirt and weeds and trees and other things that have been put in the way of completing the street.
In front of the Gables, on Grand Avenue, there is that same situation where you have to walk out into the street to get around the sewer intake.
There's a
The
storm drain there, yeah.
Thank you. So they were supposed to fix that 20 years ago, and they haven't.
Well, there you go.
All right,
It was in
excellent
CUP.
examples. Let's stop there before I have the attorney. I could feel it. She was.
So we have a first on walkability. Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Second, all right, so we got a second. So that'll be a future potential agenda item.
I think the people, though, who do all the walking in town need to, we're bragging about the fact.
Yeah, I was gonna say the buzzword. Say the buzzword.
This is just an information we're gonna get tutored, and then we can go
Yeah,
from there, right?
discussions, these are discussions.
And I think there is that document that Sherry just mentioned, and that is going to be a great springboard for discussion, because there's a lot of really good information in there.
It's
This is the
also,
complete streets. document,
Yeah.
you know.
it's
Yep.
also good for the general public just to understand too what we currently have.
I mean, complete streets, I don't think any of us were on the commission when complete streets happened, so that's all, it's just a term, it doesn't mean anything, so.
Oh, but we apply.
Yeah,
We apply it. Urban forest
So-
management plan is one we apply as well.
are we done with future agendas?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
comment on future agendas?
I guess, sure. Do you have a card? Don't bring a card, come on up. Just, if you got it quick, make it quick, Bill.
He should state his name, though.
Yeah, state your name,
Yeah, we don't know him.
Make
State your
it
name.
quick.
just for the record.
I'm spending my public time here.
For the record, state your name.
Bill Miley.
There we go, perfect.
This has to do with the February 19th agenda at the Cabin Village.
Mhm.
And it has to do with something that Larry Steingold, who I support, has been talking about, which is phase 1 and phase 2 environmental study. And I read over the statement about the phase 1 once. And it says there's no necessary need for a phase 2. But as I understand phase 1, it's all basically historical and intellectual. They don't go down to dig the ground. They look to see if anything in the past has indicated if there's any hazards in the soil. And Larry has convinced me that the history of this lot is not that clear. It goes back maybe 100 years. So that's going to come up next on the 19th, the need for a study 2, a phase 2. And I would like to suggest that your commission ask the planning director to make sure that the phase 1 is complete enough that a phase 2 doesn't have to be done. And I don't think it is. Based on the statement I read. I didn't read the phase 1, but I read the statement. And it seems to be kind of ambiguous. Thank you.
But if I'm not
Wait,
wrong,
hold on,
the
hold
concept.
on, hold on.
Yeah,
Miss-
don't say anything,
Mr. Miley,
Taylor.
that was not on the agenda today, but I wanted to make sure, out of respect for you and your time, we let you finish. That would be a great comment for the meeting on the 19th to
Too
bring
late.
to the commission's attention.
I think I have the right to talk about the future agenda, and the agenda is the Cabin Village issue, and one of the key issues is the Phase 1 and Phase 2 keeps coming up. It came up just yesterday. So
No, I agree. You can
I
comment on.
disagree, Taylor.
Oh, respectfully, you sure?
Thank you, Bill.
It keeps coming up because you bring it up, Bill.
All right.
That's enough. That's enough.
All right. No more agenda item stuff. Move on.
Okay.
Director's report. Lucas, back to you. Anything?
Pay attention to city council items that are coming up. There's some interesting things that are coming up that are going straight through city council because they aren't necessarily something that is before this body, but has elements that are still within community development.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd say just pay attention to the agenda items in the near term.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you.
Because they're definitely something that not directly discussed, but items that have been in a roundabout way discussed about stuff that we talked about tonight.
Okay.
So.
Cool. Thank you for that. All right. Commission member report. Anybody go to the MAC? No.
I went to the MAC.
You did?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Nothing.
Okay.
No, the conversation was primarily around the bike path.
Oh, got it.
And the repaving of that and the putting in the posts and the new fencing and,
Spent quite a bit of money on that.
yeah, they got some help, you know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But
Should bury some utilities.
there was not any, there was not, they were more interested in what I had to say than I was with what they had to say. So,
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you.
all right.
And then now our city council liaison, our honorable mayor.
Hey, friends.
Hello.
Hello.
Let me just bring up one item that might be of interest to you, which is on February 24th, Monday evening, 5:30 to 7:30 in Kent Hall. That will be a panel which will have help of Ojai, the county public health, a representative of Dignity Moves, and possibly others. Hopefully, maybe some kind of report from HCD around what does the program look like, irrespective of location, on the Cabin Village. So it's something that I noticed even when it was brought to you, there were so many questions around the program, not around the building, and it's natural that you would ask that. So this is an attempt to answer many questions about what the program will be like, and I'll be moderating that. So
What time was that again?
5:30 to 7:30, Monday, February 24th in Kent Hall.
Okay.
Is it too bad that that's happening after our meeting?
I don't think so because, well, that's when we can get everybody together.
Sure.
So we had toyed with the idea of either one, but I think it's okay because that program actually would be, in some sense, the same no matter the location, so
Right.
possibly not.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And actually, what I'd like to do at that meeting is not talk about the location, and I'll say that pretty clearly. That's not what we're here to discuss, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll hear if people
You'll
want to
hear
talk.
about it.
You can tell everybody to come on the 19th to the.
Oh, and I've already been telling everybody to come on the 19th. I said it last night too. So yeah, there will be a lot of people, I believe, there, and they'll be eager to hear the report.
Okay.
And then just to say, Lucas, thank you so much, because there is much that's going to come on future agenda items that several council members are going to introduce, very aligned with what you're talking about tonight. So very much about hardening in the short and the long term in all the ways you have mentioned tonight, including microgrid possibilities, utility lines, ownership. All of those things will be brought to be discussed.
Awesome.
So I'm happy to meet with anybody to speak, about my thoughts, not the council's, but my own and what I've already written about. But there's 114 microgrids in California at the moment. So there's a lot of interesting things around that, which is not exactly what you said tonight, but it's also there.
I'm super supportive of it.
Yeah.
I've thought about locations
Yeah.
around Ojai that we could do that, and like
No, it's totally
it makes
cool.
makes perfect
So
sense.
there's very interesting things. So I'm very eager to and excited to see what you're working on.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you,
thanks.
sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys, so at 8:29, we will call this adjourned.